What happened on Fortis Green Road was petty, theatrical, and painfully telling. A young woman with scissors reduced a vigil to confetti and called it conscience. She convinced herself that cutting ribbons was an act of courage against a greater wrong. In truth, it was a small act of attempted erasure, and she didn't argue with the symbol, she tried to remove it. That distinction matters in a society that prizes speech over intimidation. The yellow ribbon is not a government decree or a partisan slogan, it's a marker of absence. It says someone is missing and we have not forgotten. To snip at such a symbol on the eve of October the 7th is to step into a cemetery and rearrange the flowers because you dislike the dead. You may claim a higher ethic. You may invoke Gaza, suffering and rage. Yet the method betrays the message. If your politics begin by taking from others the means to mourn, your politics will end by taking from others the means to live together. We should be frank about the context. Britain's Jewish communities are tense and tired. Last week's killings in Manchester were not an abstraction. Doors were braced. Lives were lost. People in shul garments stood between a knife and a congregation. And in such a week, cutting ribbons outside a synagogue is not a neutral gesture, it is a taunt. Even if the woman intended only a protest against Israeli policy, the timing, place and target converted it into something colder. Prudence is a civic virtue, so is mercy. And there's also a basic point about plural moral reasoning. Grown-ups can hold two truths at once. Hamas's hostage-taking was evil. The suffering of Palestinian civilians is terrible, and I think evil. To say both is not a trick of rhetoric, it is moral literacy. We do not need to choose between compassion for hostages and compassion for Gazans, between fear for a synagogue and grief for a family in Rafah. The habit of online life is to force us into fans and anti-fans, to turn mourning into a contest to reward the loudest cruelty, and that habit is unworthy of a free, intelligent people. The woman's defence was legalistic. Call the police, she said, as if the entire question were a charge sheet. It's not only about offences, it's about a public ethic. It's about basic kindness and morality. The law can decide whether there was a criminal act, whether there was criminal damage or hate. The rest of us must decide whether we want a city where memorials are fair game for the next person with a grievance and a pair of scissors. Today it is yellow ribbons. Tomorrow it is candles for a murdered teenager or flowers for a police officer. Once we normalise tampering with each other's grief, we forfeit the common square. Symbols carry meanings across conflicts and across decades. The yellow ribbon long predates this war. It travelled from hostages in Tehran to missing children to soldiers far from home. It was a pop song in my youth. You can argue with its current use. You cannot wish away the seam of human longing it represents. Better to answer a symbol with a symbol. Tie your own ribbon. Write your own note. Organise your own vigil. Speech against speech is the democratic bargain. Vandalism against speech is the shortcut of people who fear they cannot persuade. There is a further awkward truth. Acts like this do not aid Palestinians. They harden hearts. They confirm suspicions and they shrink the audience for legitimate criticism of Israeli policy. If your aim is to argue that siege and bombardment have crossed moral lines, you will not succeed by desecrating reminders of kidnapped civilians who are still harboured in tunnels beneath Gaza City. The case about collective punishment must be made with moral care, not spite. Restraint is persuasive, spite is not. And there's an equal warning to those who cheered when the woman was condemned. Too many delight in the humiliation of an opponent captured on a shaky phone. The point is not to sharpen the pylon. The point is to reinscribe a norm. We do not touch each other's memorials. We do not pull down ribbons, candles, flowers or photographs. We do not police grief. If we can agree on that flaw, we can argue hard about it above. We can argue hard about the war, about hostages, about ceasefires, about governments, about leaders and strategy. But without that flaw, everything becomes a fight. Everywhere becomes a battlefield, and every passerby is a potential enemy. What then should have happened on that railings line in Muswell Hill? A short conversation and a longer pause. Someone should have said, leave them. If you wish, put up your own. And she could have left, not because she was defeated, but because she had recognised that her protest was trespassing upon mourning. And that is the adult response in a city of many sorrows. The Manchester funerals remind us what is at stake. 2 men are dead, who should today be alive. In Gaza, families count their dead in numbers that numb the tongue. To carry all that, London needs more careful hands. We need space where a ribbon can flutter without fear, where a candle can burn to its base, where a Kaddish can be said and a prayer for peace can be spoken, without someone thrusting scissors into the scene. That is not a high ideal, it is a low bar. Let us pass it. If you want a simple rule for the coming days, try this. When you meet a symbol of grief that is not yours, treat it as if it were yours. Do not cut it down, do not trample it, walk past it quietly, or tie your own ribbon and stand beside it. It is possible to argue fiercely about policy and still protect the little human rituals that keep us from despair, that keep us human. It is possible to hold two thoughts at the same time. It is possible to be tender while being just. It is possible to remember the hostages and to lament the dead in Gaza. It is possible to be better than a pair of scissors. And if you want to see this in practice, you go to the site of the Gallipoli War, and at the end of that peninsula there is a monument to the dead, to the Turks who lie with the Allied troops from Australia, from New Zealand, from Britain, together. And they are mourned together every year. We need to grow up, and we need to stop we need to stop surrendering to the blinkered approach of social media, where you're either on this side or that side. Most of the time we're not.